It was a night like any other, dark, quiet, and still. I'd just finished an exhausting shift at work and was heading home, eager to collapse into bed. On the roads were nearly deserted, and the only sounds were the hum of my car's engine and the occasional swoosh of wind. It should have been peaceful, but something about that night felt off. I chalked it up to fatigue, tried to shake off the unease that had settled deep in my chest, but the farther I drove, the more the air around me seemed to thicken. The streets were nearly empty, the occasional flickering streetlight casting long distorted shadows on the asphalt. As I turned onto a darker, more secluded road, the sense of being watched hit me like a wave. My skin prickled, goosebumps rising on my arms. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead, but for some reason, the light felt too dim. Like it couldn't quite push back the shadows surrounding me, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But the unease lingered, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I kept driving, the quiet, oppressive. The sound of my tires against the road seemed deafening in the silence. Another glance in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. At first I thought I was seeing things, but no. There was definitely someone in the back seat, a figure hunched low, barely visible in the dim light. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest, my pulse ringing in my ears. The figure was so still, I wasn't even sure if it was real. I glanced away, convinced I'd imagined it. Maybe it was the exhaustion messing with me, but when I looked again, there it was, clearer this time. A person sitting quietly in the back seat. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my throat as I stared, wide-eyed. The figure didn't move, didn't even blink. Just sat there, watching me. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. My head was spinning. Is it a prank? I tried to rationalize it, but no matter how hard I tried, my mind refused to settle. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I wasn't alone in the car, like something was waiting. I glanced in the mirror again, my chest tightening. The figure was closer. The terror hit me full force, raw and paralyzing. I could see details now. The person's face, or rather the lack of it. Their face was pale, featureless, just a blank smooth surface. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever was in the back seat. My breath came in sharp, panicked gasps as I sped through the streets. The road was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do. Was this some kind of sick joke? But then I saw the red and blue flashing lights in my rearview mirror. I almost screamed, relief washing over me until I realized that the lights weren't behind me, they were on me. A cop had pulled me over. I swallowed hard and pulled to the side of the road, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The officer approached the car, his flashlight blinding me, but I didn't dare move. "Ma'am," he said, his voice sharp, his eyes scanning me like he was looking for something. "Are you all right?" I nodded quickly, trying to calm my racing heart. I'm fine, officer. Just a little shaken." He didn't move, just kept staring at me as if he knew something I didn't. "Ma'am," he said, voice lowering, "I need you to step out of the car." I hesitated, confusion flickering in my mind. Is something wrong? "We received reports of a dangerous situation in this area," he said, looking behind me, his eyes flicking to the back seat. "There's been a string of incidents, people driving with an intruder hiding in their back seats." I froze, my pulse shot up, and I swallowed hard. My stomach dropped. That's exactly what's happening to me right now. The officer stepped back, his voice turning serious. "You're lucky you didn't get hurt. We've had reports of people who haven't been so fortunate." I stared at him, my heart thundering in my chest, but I didn't see anyone back there. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he moved toward the back of my car and opened the door, shining his flashlight inside. For a long, agonizing second, I could hear the sound of his boots scraping on the gravel, the tension in the air so thick I could almost taste it. The officer's face went pale, his eyes widening. "There's nothing here," he muttered, stepping back and glancing at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "But the others, they weren't so lucky." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream, but my throat was too dry. I glanced back at the empty seat in the back of my car, the weight of his words hanging in the air like an unspoken warning. "Always check your back seat," he said, his voice suddenly strained. "It's better to be safe than sorry." I didn't argue. I couldn't. The terror that had gripped me earlier was still there, crawling under my skin. I drove off, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see that pale, blank face staring back at me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter how fast I drove, I was never truly alone in my car.